The future is not CMDB, it's context. Hi, I'm Alex, the Managing Director at Einar Partners. And for the past 5 years, our company has based our entire operations on building the best service models and CMDBs. But today, AI is entering the stage, and more specifically, AI agents win the power to reason. But in order to do reasoning, we need context. And this is where the future gets interesting. In the video today, from beautiful Lisbon and Portugal, I'm going to break down exactly how AI agents can significantly improve reasoning, context, root cause analysis. In our opinion, the future of operations is not driven by humans and more power in capital, but is driven by credits and AI, and you need to prepare. So tag along, because this is going to be something new and a proper deep dive. First of all, don't worry, this is not going to be a video where I declare the death of the CMDB. No, I'm not here to be controversial, we are here to be realistic. Because the truth is, the CMDB is still very useful. And that is the exact point. It is extending beyond its original purpose into something called the context layer. And I will touch upon that later. But before we go there, let's backtrack a little bit. So the CMDB today, it has developed. It's not static, it's quite automatic. We have integrations, we have discovery, we have service mapping, we have services, we have applications. We have all of these wonderful features which many people then say, hey, it's a living system. And yes, it is. But that living system is still not fast enough to keep up with how the reality is changing on a day-to-day in the business. Now, at the research unit at Einar Partners, we've also looked at the efforts of creating CMDBs, such as the internal efforts in infrastructure teams, in application owners, in database teams, and so on and so on. And these efforts are not small. And then, if we're also looking at, let's say, the lost opportunity cost when you are maintaining the CMDB in what you otherwise could have used to ship features, then all of a sudden the CMDB historically seen have been a bit of a tough sell for CIOs. I myself sat in boardrooms where CIOs and CTOs, they have been, let's say, slightly skeptical to the efforts taken to do a complete rehaul of the CMDB in order to be compliant, in order to do incident management, change management, and many more things. But that is now changing. And actually, the companies that has invested in proper CMDB and data models now have a competitive edge because the graph database. First of all, what differs between a graph database or what I'm going to call a context layer versus a traditional CMDB? Well, a traditional CMDB is a predefined truth. People are still busy designing which relationships are necessary, which classes are necessary, declaring ownership structures, and many other things like that. And again, this is necessary. But a graph database is something different. That is the space where AI agents actually reason, they do memory, they act, and they can also take decisions. And the fundamental concepts of a graph database or a context layer is very, very different from a CMDB. Because first of all, it's slightly different build. You're less restricted. You have something called nodes and entities. There are still relationships, but there is more flexibility. But more importantly, it's more scalable. It can treat a lot of different types of objects compared to a normal CMDB. Let me give you some examples. For example, you could have live signals or monitoring tools. You could have deployment events. You could have compliance controls like DORA or NIS2. You could have economics data. You could have data from SAP. The sky is the limit a little bit in what you can put into a graph database. And this is the exact purpose, that the CMDB is transforming to becoming a source to a much larger system. And it is within that system that the agents can act and reason, and they can take decisions. And don't take my words for this. Latest research, which I will link in the video below by the way, is showing that using these context and graph databases that can reduce root cause analysis from hours to less than 30 minutes. And it can also increase the accuracy up to 96%. And this is happening today. This is not some theoretical future that I'm speaking about, best case scenario, or some small pilot or proof of concept. No. The companies that are using graph databases in order to do blast and impact radius, live time and real time impact analysis and data, which revenue flows are impacted, which customers are impacted in real time. Those companies have an enormous competitive edge. So, let's now speak very briefly on how AI agents actually operate within the graph database itself. So the way that AI agents works is that they don't require predefined queries, but rather they traverse through relationships and they find the problem space themselves. And based on the available nodes and based on the available data and the context within that context layer, then the agents can reason, they can act, and they can retrieve answers for you. And what that means is that the person on the other end, either prompting or through an LLM or in a user interface for that matter, can get a much more accurate results because the agent has the possibility to be more flexible through a graph or context layer. So I guess what we're trying to say here is that agents don't require predefined someone before having said this is how reality looks like, but instead it's way more flexible. Maybe it sounds a bit abstract, so let me give you an example. The agent doesn't need to follow a predefined path, but instead it could, for example, start at the infrastructure layer, move across the application stack, identify the services that it supports, link it to any business processes, expand it to any customer context, plus correlate live signals such as incidents and ongoing changes. And the agent will also include indirect and previously undefined edges within that graph and potentially even enrich the path with additional data sources, for example revenue streams or risk controls, all in real time. So in other words, the answer is not retrieved, but is being constructed. And this is the major difference. The CMDB is queried in a structured way, meanwhile graph databases are traversed based on finding a problem space. And that's where the power of reasoning comes in. And that's where the power of agents and AI really shines in combination with CMDB data and context layers and a lot of other more data sources. Alright, it might sound right now like all of a sudden we're proclaiming that graph databases is everything, but they're not a silver bullet. They are great for agents, context, blast radius, reasoning, but they lack something which the CMDB has an upper edge in, and that is auditability, ownership and compliance. So to be clear, a graph doesn't eliminate modeling, but it shifts where the modeling is happening. And context is not a replacement for CMDB structure, but actually context is a byproduct of it. Meaning, if you do a good CMDB and good service modeling and feed that to your graph layer and graph database, you're golden. So to summarize a little bit, the CMDB, it queries fixed data structures. Someone has decided about reality. But a graph database, it navigates fluid connections and it adapts to the problem. It doesn't have to adapt to the database schema. And this is why agents prefer graph-based structures. As they reduce dependence on the predefined models, they allow for incremental discovery, they tolerate different data types, and most importantly, it can scale with increasing complexity. We're speaking billions of nodes potentially in a graph. And this is the power of the future context layer. Alright, perhaps you're now wondering, hey, Have we wasted all of the efforts in building CMDBs? Should we stop doing it? No, please don't. Because again, the CMDBs are fit for a particular purpose. A graph database is not optimized to give you reports, enterprise-level reports, for example, on how many P1 incidents have we had on service X in the past 4 days. The graph database and graph and context layer is meant for different purposes. And there is a final element to all of this. So far, all I've been speaking about is reasoning. For example, root cause analysis, impact analysis, give me some context that you bring back to me. But that's just half of the story. The other half is actually taking action. And that's where something called MCP protocols come into action. In this particular video, I'm not going to go through in detail what the MCP protocol means. But in a future video, we're going to do a deep dive exactly on how you can leverage MCP protocols in combination with graph databases and how that ultimately can create truly autonomous IT operations. Not in a fairy tale world, but in an organized fashion with proper guardrails, governance, and structure behind it. So I want to end with one piece of advice here, which is that the concept of the single source of truth is actually breaking down, and it's being replaced rather by federated meshes of data that's come together in the context layer. And you as an IT leader, you can prepare for the future. As long as you don't treat the CMDB as an enemy, because it's not, but treating it as the center of your operating model, that will pose a risk. And clinging to it as your single source of truth, it's not only a risk, it's a strategic risk. So we believe that winners in the next 5 years, they will not be the one with the best and most perfect CMDBs necessarily, but it will be the ones who treat the CMDBs as one of many data sources into the context layer. Whew, that was a handful, I know. But this is no longer experimental. This is happening. And the cutting-edge enterprises are moving towards this direction. We're speaking context engines, graph databases, and proper agentic workflows. I hope you found this video useful and that you will continue to follow our content. Subscribe to our LinkedIn, subscribe to our YouTube channel, because this is where the future is heading, and we would love for you to take part of it. Thank you so much for watching.